Here, ladies and gentlemen, Hal Roach presents for your entertainment and approval, Laurel and Hardy. Recording by Elmer Raguse. We thank you.
Hello, and welcome to another special episode of the Laurel and Hardy podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Vasey, the author of the forthcoming book, Laurel and Hardy Silence, the editor of the Laurel and Hardy magazine, and your host for the next hour or so. Now, usually when I release bonus episodes of the podcast, it's usually on a topic unrelated to our chronological journey through Stan and Babe's films. But this time, this bonus episode is very much related. As I'm sure you'll remember, at the end of Season 1, we completed our look at the boys' silent films, and we now find ourselves arriving at the Talkies. And to begin our adventures in sound, today I want to focus on an individual whose importance to the Hal Roach Studios and its successful transition to Talkies cannot be underestimated. That person was the studio's chief sound engineer, Elmer Raguse, the bringer of sound to the studio. And so, in planning this episode, one name jumped out at me as the ideal guest, and that is Elmer's grandson, Craig, the keeper of the Raguse flame. So this should serve as the perfect bridge between the silent and the sound era on the podcast, just as Elmer himself proved to be to Stan, Ollie, the Little Rascals, Charley Chase, and everybody else on a lot of fun.
That's a good idea, Ollie. You bet your life it is.
Before we get into the main stuff, I want to say hello and thank you to everyone who's joined us on Patreon over the last month. And there's been a real influx of people showing their support for the show, and in return gaining access to a host of benefits, including extra podcast episodes, bonus segments, early access, video episodes, invitations to Q&A sessions, and live podcast recordings, and a gift subscription to our Laurel and Hardy magazine. So a huge welcome to the community to our new patrons, Bob Gassell, Scott Olson, Scott Butterworth, Paul Mayle, Dave Sekula, Ali Stevenson, John Nelson, Adrian Brailsford, and Gavin Baldwin. Welcome aboard, guys, and thank you so much for your support. So that's it. Now sit back and let's welcome today's guest. When we talk about Laurel and Hardy's transition from silent to sound pictures, we often use phrases such as they took it in their stride or seamless transition, and rightly so. However, it wasn't just because their voices perfectly matched their on-screen personas and the use of witty dialogue. There was much more to it than that. Behind the scenes was a small team of hard-working individuals headed by Chief Sound Engineer Elmer Raguse, tasked with converting the studio stages for sound recording and then finding solutions to all the associated problems and challenges making these types of pictures produced. The ease with which the Hal Roach Studios made their transition to talking pictures was made possible by the talents of Elmer Raguse, and today we are going to pay tribute to him and all that he achieved, with special attention, of course, to the impact he had on Laurel and Hardy. And to help me to do this, we are blessed to be joined by Elmer's grandson, Craig, so it is with great pleasure that I say, Craig Raguse, welcome to the Laurel and Hardy podcast.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure, and it's an honour, Craig, to have you with us today. I'm really excited to chat with you. The more that I learn about this transition period, the transition to talking pictures, the more I learn about how important Elmer Raguse, your grandfather, was to the Hal Roach Studios and to Laurel and Hardy's career. So I wouldn't say that he's an unsung hero, because obviously his name is familiar, I'm sure, to many, many listeners and many fans of the boys. But I do think that more needs to be said about Elmer and his work, and more praise certainly needs to be directed towards him. Obviously, he is recorded in a lot of the biographies of the boys, and rightly so. But obviously space in a book is limited to how much detail you can go into with the technical aspects. So I think this podcast is great for this, because we can spend as much time as we want now discussing Elmer and his career, and really shine a light on the fabulous work that he did at the Hal Roach Studios and beyond, of course. So if it's okay with you, Craig, what I'd like to do is to start just talking a little bit about yourself, and if you could tell us, what are your earliest memories of Laurel and Hardy, and sort of how were you introduced to them, if that's okay?
My earliest would probably be watching Babes in Toyland on TV with my father.
Oh, okay.
And which was always a particular favorite with his, because as a child, he ended up with some of the wooden soldiers
Oh,
as
fantastic.
playthings after the movie was made.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when my grandfather retired and they moved, my grandmother decided to throw away all that movie junk.
Oh,
That was her
no.
words.
Oh, no.
And the soldiers went along with them. Of course, my dad was long gone by that time, but the soldiers were still in the garage and they ended up in the heat.
Oh,
So,
no. Oh, dear.
fortunately, my grandfather did save all of his correspondence and pictures and that type of thing. So I have quite a bit of that.
Fantastic.
But who knows what was thrown out? It was,
Oh, I
it's,
dread to think. That's
oh
painful.
yeah, it's
But that was very
not
much the
fun to
way,
think
wasn't
about.
it? I mean, it's like, and I know Richard Band often talks about Hal Roach and how he just was not sentimental about the history, and what came before. He was always thinking about the future and what came next. So it kind of doesn't surprise me in a way that people just saw it as junk, and going back a few generations and what have you. So, so just as you were growing up, and you were sort of introduced to Laurel and Hardy, how aware were you of your grandfather's participation in those movies? Is that something that you knew about immediately, or?
Um, my dad didn't really say much about it. I remember sitting in, and I don't know whether you have pizza parlors in England or not, but we had pizza parlors here, and there they had the little box where the kids would go in and watch, movies, and it was usually either Laurel Hardy or the Rascals.
Right, right.
So I saw a lot of silence like that, and of course they were silence, and they had no credits. They were cut out. I didn't really realize his involvement until quite a bit later on, when it just came up. I mean, I had visited them out there in California, but I was too young. My actually earliest memory out there was when my great grandmother passed away, and we were actually staying in the same room, and I was there when she passed. It was dark, but it was kind of weird. And then there was a party afterwards, and all these people were running around, and me as about a year and a half year old or so, or not, maybe not even that, was just kind of swarmed by adults. So, and I remember the swimming pool. I remember learning to swim in the swimming pool at another, later age and all that. And this was in a house that kind of overlooked. It was on Mulholland Drive in Beverly Hills, one that they had built. Swimming pool had a big silver dollar in the bottom of the swimming pool. And
Was this the house that's sort of on that hill with those beautiful views? Is that the one I've seen on some of the pictures?
Yes,
Right,
that was
right.
it. Yeah, they sold that to George Maharis, who was an actor. I don't know if you recognize that name. There was a TV show called I think Route 66, where he and another guy went up and down. But anyway, he bought that house from them when they moved. I think he may still own it. He did do an addition above the garage for his art studio, but that's about it. Otherwise it's the same. But anyway, as far as Laurel and Hardy, I think when I realized fully the extent of his involvement is when, after he retired, actually in 1965, and when I was about 7, and they came and stayed with us in Tulsa for a while. And there was a gentleman lived across the street and was a big Laurel and Hardy fan, huge Laurel and Hardy fan, and had a book, little paperback, and I forget who wrote, but it kind of went through some of the episodes and all that, and my grandfather annotated it for him. I wish I could find that book.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that fellow has passed away, and I think his ex-wife, or who has it. So, but anyway, that's basically my earliest recollection of Laurel and Hardy. And I always loved them.
That's great. So what were your thoughts on that then? So when you actually realised that your grandfather worked with Laurel and Hardy, I mean that's I can't get my head around that. How did that feel? Can you remember?
It was kind of a wow thing, and when I was with him, he usually wanted to show me his ham radio set and how he would talk, because that was his earliest electronics, was building his own ham radio. So he tried his best to teach me Morse code. I wasn't that much interested in it, but I kind of figured, what's the point? But it's but I was interested in the electronics of it and all that. So that was my relationship with him up until about that time.
Yeah.
Never really talked to him much about the Laurel and Hardy stuff. I did, however, get into audio engineering myself. I had a recording studio for a while here in Tulsa.
Great.
And I have a degree in broadcasting and film, which mostly was me doing most of the audio work. Everybody brought their audio stuff to me when I was in college. When I first went, they were turning one of their TV studios into a recording studio. And when I first went to visit the campus, I asked to see the plans that they had. And I'm looking at the plans, and there's no leads from the studio to any other part of the building.
Right.
Nothing down to the sound room for movies, nothing to the TV studio one. It was just all controlled. I asked them, why don't you have this connected with everything else? I think that's what got me in. My grades weren't all that good out of high school, but they wanted me to come in and fix the studio, I guess. Because I'd already been working in a recording studio when I was in high school here in Tulsa. So
right. Did your father work in that sort of area as well? Or?
No.
Right.
He was a salesman, a pump salesman. I worked for him for quite a number of years, all the while doing the recording studio at night, and he was brought up as an only child. So my grandfather was around quite a bit, but basically raised by my grandmother, who was an interesting person. She was very funny, and I loved her very much. She was not exactly, she didn't know what she was doing when she was raising a child, basically. She wasn't abusive or anything like that. She was just, she had grown up in a rather wealthy family in Brooklyn. Her father ran the Brooklyn shipyards.
Right.
But he basically made his own way of sales. He used to sell newspapers on the corner. He said frequently getting in fights with other kids to get the best corners. So he basically grew up as a salesman. He became a mechanical engineer. So he had he grew up went to pump companies and all that, and knew how to do pumps and design pumps and that type of thing. And that's where he went into. He did have a couple of stories about going to the studio to pick up my grandfather and that type of thing. So he said he went one time and they were running late, and I'm not sure, this may have been at Fox or it may have been somewhere else, but he said he watched Orson Welles do 51 takes of one line. I don't know what movie that was, and it may have been one that was canceled because they went over budget because he had a reputation for doing that.
Yes, yeah.
But he said it was rather interesting. So.
Oh, great.
But that's the extent of what he was in on it and all that. I mean, he obviously grew up with. He went to school with Marilyn Monroe.
Wow. You just slide that one in there. That's great.
Norma Baker. Yeah, Norma Baker. I've got a yearbook with her picture in it, actually.
Oh, great.
His doubles partner in tennis was an actor by the name of Richard Anderson.
Right.
I don't know if you ever got the $6 Million Man over there.
Oh, I know of it. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. He played the role of Oscar Goldman, basically the boss.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
So that was his doubles partner, and they remained friends for life. He knew Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford was a bit older. Mm-hmm. Used to let anybody that was connected with the business. He let him into the movies for free. He was an usher at a movie house there. He played tennis with Spencer Tracy's son.
Oh, wow.
Spencer Tracy, he was playing tennis one day, and a fellow called him over, and it was Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy's son was deaf.
Oh, right.
And asked if they would play tennis with him. Mm-hmm. And so, he did. His son had some other issues that made him basically end up in a wheelchair a few years later. But and he played against Groucho's son, Arthur Marx, although he was a few years older.
Right.
So didn't particularly like him, but and so. He grew up around those type of. He was actually offered to part in Little Rascals.
Oh, was he really?
Yes, he was, and which was kind of my grandmother's doing. I actually had some publicity photos taken by Stax Graves of my father at a young age.
Wow.
They're on the website. I think they're on my Facebook page, but My grandfather found out about it and declared, "No son of mine is going to be in show business," and put a stop to it.
Did he really? Oh, that's amazing. Okay, imagine that your father was one of the Little Rascals. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Good grief.
Where were you brung up?
So going back to Elmer then. So where did he hail from, Craig? Where did he come from? And what can you tell us about his early life?
Well, his father Carl came from Alsace-Lorraine region in France.
Okay.
And immigrated, married a Canadian lady by the name of Irene. He had a brother, Roy, who also worked at Hal Roach Studios for a little while.
Right.
It's kind of confusing because my grandfather's name is Elmer Roy Raguse, and then Roy's name was Roy. I don't know what his middle name was. I never met him.
Right.
Roy also had a son, Richard, who I have met, who also worked at Hal Roach Studios, more in the TV age.
Right.
He won a BAFTA for the first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve.
Oh, wow. Oh, one of my favorite movies. Fantastic.
Oh, yeah. And he worked on Marilyn Monroe's last movie that was never finished.
Right. Right.
In fact, I think they interviewed him in a documentary on that somewhere. I forget what the documentary is called. But Richard had told me that my grandfather actually fired him from Hal Roach Studios, and he said it was the best thing that ever happened to me because he said I was slacking, and but he ended up actually working on the Tonight Show here in the States with Johnny Carson and quite a number of other movies. But anyway, this was basically in New York, New Jersey area.
Right.
He did have a couple of sisters. And basically he got into sound when he was about 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And he had met a fellow on a swimming beach, and they got to talking, and the fellow had a ham radio set. So, and I got this from this guy is actually a guy that wrote his obituary in the ham radio journal back in Florida, where my father. And this is how far back they went. They hopped on the back of his old Indian motorcycle and went to see the ham radio set. And basically, my grandfather started building it from scratch.
Wow!
And I have many pictures of those.
Yes, I think I've seen one with his own when he was 16. That's right. Yes, he was 16, and then he's sitting there in front of this radio, which is just phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, all hand built. I've got one that actually has a list of all the parts that were in it, and. From there on, he went into the Merchant Marine, worked for the Marconi Corporation, and from there went to, he built and engineered the first radio station in New York City, WOR, which still is in existence today. It was actually in a department store.
Okay.
Because the department store sold the radios, but there were no radio stations, so they had to provide their own radio station for the radio.
Brilliant. That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Then he went to work for AT&T, helped install the phone system in New York City. Not exactly sure what the job is, but it was probably wiring the switchboards and that type of thing. And he worked for another radio station, and then went back to work for basically Western Electric, and which is where he started working in the group that developed electric recording.
Right.
Okay, so instead of recording through the cone, they used microphones and all that, and he installed the first electric recording studio at Columbia Records, and then 6 months later recorded or installed the first electric studio for Victor in Camden, New Jersey, at the church studio there.
Oh, the Baptist church, yes.
And which is kind of where we get into. This happened a couple times in his life. He remained an employee of Western Electric, but Victor wanted him to be there to take care of the equipment. So he's one of the engineers on the first electric recordings at Victor and all that. Mm-hmm. So while being employee of Western Electric, but Victor was paying his salary.
Right.
And so at this point, he also put together, Victor wanted to get something that was kind of portable, which he built the portable system, designed and built the portable system. It required 2 trucks, one for the system and one for the batteries to run the system. And at which point they sent a unit off to Europe and South America, and in the United States, one of the Victor producers by the name of Ralph Peer first took it to Bristol, Tennessee, to record country music, and which basically is what Johnny Cash called the Big Bang of country music.
Oh, okay.
Because he recorded the Carter family, which was the mother and father of Johnny Cash's later on wife, June Carter, and basically what were considered at that time race records, even though it was a hillbilly type, as they call it, hillbilly music. And Ralph went on to record blues in Memphis, Tennessee, gospel and sermons in the South and like South Carolina, and went on to record Hispanic music down in Texas, Native American music, and went out to the West Coast and Hawaii and recorded Hawaiian slack key music. So it was basically all this regional type stuff that Victor figured that they were going to sell back to the people in that area.
Okay.
Well, it kind of took off and everybody started buying it.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and that's basically what the American Epic documentary was about, is how Ralph Peer took all this stuff and then they kind of went down Carter family and Native American and that type of thing, and showed how this kind of opened up the communication between, and basically shrunk the world a bit.
Yeah.
And so at the end of that movie, the third part is that they take a reconstructed version of the Western Electric and they do new recordings.
Right.
With people. So that you have people like Elton John doing a recording. You have Willie Nelson. You have Alabama Shakes, who actually won a Grammy for their recording on this documentary, and the comedian Steve Martin with Edie Brickell, who's Paul Simon's wife. And I don't know if you know that Steve Martin is an excellent banjo player, so there was no comedy here.
Yeah.
It was basically roots music, and the music was produced by Jack White, the guitar player for the White Stripes, and others, and T-Bone Burnett, along with Bernard McMahon, who's the director of the movie, and Allison McGordy, who was one of the other producers. Documentary is narrated by Robert Redford, who's also an executive producer. So it's an interesting thing about how this kind of shrunk, and my grandfather's contribution was building this thing that went on the road.
This portable recording device. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
that's it. As you say, it's kind of a world-changing technical advancement, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
So basically, after that, he became an employee of Victor,
mm-hmm.
and eventually Victor sent him and a bunch of other guys out to Hollywood to install the Western Electric system out there.
To the Hal Roach Studios.
Yes, Hal Roach, and actually my grandfather had also installed down in Cuba a studio.
Oh, I've seen the photographs, I think, in Cuba, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that was with a friend of his, whose name I'll remember in a second. And both of them actually went out to California. My grandfather went to Hal Roach, and the other guy, his name escapes me, went to Fox. And I think that's where the Fox connection comes in later on.
Right, okay.
And so at the meantime, my grandfather was also, because the recording studio for Victor was at Hal Roach Studios, he was also director of West Coast recording for Victor.
Right.
And he remained an employee of Victor because Victor still owned the sound system.
Yeah.
Until for a few years, until Roach bought it out, and then Roach asked my grandfather to stay on.
Right. Okay. So do you know when did Elmer actually become an employee of Hal Roach? Do you know when that was?
I'm really not sure. I don't know if it was before or after he had left for was probably before he was dismissed for a couple of years by
Ginsberg.
the guy that MGM sent over, Henry Ginsberg.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
Was that
1931, 1 or 2?
31, somewhere 31. In there, 31 to 30. I think he came back in December of 32, or it was May. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
somewhere in there, 31 and 32.
Yeah.
He had gone up to San Francisco to install a system for a company up there, a recording system for a record company up there, and then he did some work at Fox.
Yeah. This is during that period of when he was let go from Hal Roach. He went and did that then, did he?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it, and then eventually he went back when Ginsberg left. Hal Roach wanted him back. So
yeah.
And rehired him.
Yeah, I think he realized just how. I think when he's obviously left, they realized just what an important figure he is. And they need to get him back in. Yeah, I often wonder what did Hal Roach think about it.
Yeah, at that point, I don't think Hal Roach had much choice in the matter because MGM was trying to cut costs. So I'm not really sure what the exact relationship between MGM and Roach Studios was at that time. However, apparently MGM had quite a bit of sway at that particular point.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, I know that. Yeah, because Ginsberg was employed. Well, he was sent in from the Bank of America on MGM's behalf to make sure that the money was kept tight. And at that point, he let a lot of people go. I think Richard Courier was one of them. To let somebody like Elmer Raguse go from the studio when he is the one, making sure that everything operates from the sound recording side, it's just, can't believe it. I think
by that time, he probably had his crew whipped into shape. To where they knew what they were doing. So
it's like getting rid of a big salary, I suppose. Yeah, when everybody else could do the work underneath them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, after a bit of time, when other people start coming in, you start losing that, and other people leave, you start losing that knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
of course,
when my grandfather first went out to Hal Roach, and Hal Roach himself told me this. I was a phone conversation with him right after my grandmother died back in 1983, I believe.
Right.
Could have been early 84. Somebody gave me his phone number. I called him up. I told him who I was, and then he talked for an hour and a half.
Great.
So, but he had told me that nobody knew what was going on with sound, is that the studio relied completely on my grandfather for the scheduling.
Yeah.
And until they got into the rotation, which was probably where I think, if you look at some of the stories in Randy Skretbeck's book, some of the other people in the studio were at odds with my grandfather, maybe.
Okay.
But my grandfather was a serious guy. He also had a very strange sense of humor, too, for that matter. And he took his job very seriously, and he wasn't going to. He would explain something once and try to teach something, but if it went on beyond that, then he did not suffer fools gladly. So,
okay.
he had to keep things on schedule, and he knew he had to keep things on schedule.
Yeah.
So that's probably where he got on the wrong side of a few people. As far as I can tell, he was never on the wrong side of any of the actors, as far as I can tell. So, in fact, he did his best. Like most of the other sound guys that went out there that tried to transfer these actors into talkies. And speaking on the set, some people didn't, some people made it, some people didn't.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating little period there. And I was reading, there's a great book, I don't know if you've read it, by Scott Iman, The Speed of Sound. And it covers that whole transition period. And he talks really well about how much sort of, I want to say, power the sound technicians, or anybody who had a little bit of knowledge on sound technology, how sort of influential they became at the studios. And he talks about a guy, what's his name, Roy Pomeroy at Paramount. He begins life sort of a lowly technician on the lot, but then suddenly he's head of the sound section, if you like. And he's directing pictures, and he's calling the shots. He's locking down studio sets. The executives of the company can't even get in to check on how the production is going. And it's just a really interesting, the sound engineers became kings on these studios, because nobody else had that experience or that knowledge. And I just
Right.
find that really interesting. And I just wondered how Elmer dealt with that. And, you know, because obviously this Roy Pomeroy guy sounded as if he really enjoyed that power and he wanted to exercise that over everybody. How do you know how Elmer sort of handled that transition? Did he?
I think he just handled it. That was his job.
Yeah.
I mean, he did his job. He was never a person that wanted power or recognition for that matter. You know, which is a little sad because, I mean, I'm looking at some lists of old audio engineers and whatever, and his name's not even mentioned.
Right. Really?
And yet, you know, here's a guy that not only was there from the beginning as far as the development of the equipment, but also a lot of other innovations along the way.
Yes.
I think there's a part about the light valve in Randy's book.
Yes, I
and,
love that.
I have my reservations on how true that story actually is.
Right.
But it led to the development of the compressor, of the audio compressor.
Right.
Which is basically every bass player in the world can thank my grandfather for developing the compressor.
Wow.
And engineer. During his time in San Francisco that I mentioned earlier, he took the same concept of the compressor and applied it to the FM radio signal to stabilize the carrier wave of an FM radio signal.
Oh, I have an appointment with Stanley.
What about our radio?
Well, what about it?
It hasn't worked in 3 months. Just because you've been too indisposed to put up an aerial.
I'll put it up tomorrow.
You'll put it up today, right now.
And it's basic. And I actually have and I think I posted it. I actually have that diagram that he hand wrote.
Why, that's a blueprint of the Boulder Dam.
Which was kind of weird when I was in college. They had a radio station there too, which was part of the same area that I was in the broadcasting and film area. And the engineer there mentioned about the compressor stabilizing the carrier wave, and I looked at him and said, "My grandfather did that," and he's just looking at me like, "No way."
That's great. Oh, that's fantastic.
I did not have the diagram at that time. This only came into my hands after my grandmother passed away. My father brought all the stuff back, but I didn't really get into it until after my father passed away.
Right.
And started going through all this stuff.
Yeah.
I will give my father credit that he did keep the pictures that Stax Graves took about for the Little Rascal role, because they are rather cringeworthy.
Oh, that's great. No, that sounds fantastic.
He didn't toss them, but he never showed them to us.
Oh, I'd love to see those. That's fantastic. Just going back to the story of the light valves. So that if anybody hasn't read that part of Randy's book or seen it, because there are reports of that, I think, in the press, the local, the trade papers. Whereas if Richard Courier wanted to record a gunshot or something, and the light valves kept popping. And Elmer was saying, no, you can't be doing that. That's too much of a noise, and we have to keep replacing these light valves. And he says, well, okay, so what do they cost? A couple of $100. And Courier says, no, it's about, was it 25 cents a piece or something?
I think he said 10 cents, but that doesn't include the shutdown. That doesn't include the shutdown of production while you're replacing them, which costs a lot of money too.
That's a good point. Yes, that's a very.
And then
good
everybody
point.
goes off into different directions, and you got to get them all back in to start up again.
That's a good point. Yes, I like that. There's another one as well. I found a report in the Hollywood Filmograph from the 22nd of June, 1929. I'll just read this if I can see it. The print's really small. Roach technicians combat comedy sound blasts. And it says, Elmer R. Raguse, Victor engineer, in charge of the Hal Roach sound recording staff, has perfected a system by which blasting is eliminated on all high-pitched sounds, it is claimed. Comedy recording requires a technique all of its own, Raguse explained. It is far easier to make a smooth reproduction of ordinary voices and conversations than of fun-making sounds. But we've been able to construct a controlling apparatus which enables us to prevent the thundering blasts usually recorded by smashes, falls, bangs, and loud voices. Recording of the Laurel and Hardy comedies has given the engineering staff the most trouble, he says. Laurel and Hardy's pictures are pure slapstick, with the attendant crashes, explosions, and other fun-making noises. The children of our gang, with their high-pitched voices and noisy pranks, rank second to Laurel and Hardy in the necessity for care in recording. I just thought it was lovely. It's a really nice little piece.
And that was basically, that's the compressors, that's what recording studios now use to limit the highs and that type of thing.
Right.
As I mentioned bass guitar players earlier, because electric bass guitars are notorious for being all over the place as far as volume from different notes and that type of thing. Right. So it kind of evens it out. Right. In that it does help. It does help against recording spikes. Yeah. That would be the gunshots, noises, and that thing. Yeah. Voltage controlled amplifier. That's what it technically is. It's a voltage controlled amplifier.
Gotcha.
So it's that in itself. And I think that's part of the reason they sent my grandfather to Roach, is because they knew they were going to run into these problems.
Yeah, yeah.
And probably, and I'm just guessing, knowing him, that he was probably the person that was going to be able to handle it the best. So, not taking anything away from the other engineers and all that, and I'm sure some of the other engineers had input into a lot of other things too at Roach.
Yeah.
It was a really good group.
Was it a team of 9? I think I read somewhere. 9 people underneath him. Yeah, something
like that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I've got a picture of with some of them. I think it also has. Oh, it's on my Facebook. It has Laurel and Hardy in it and some of the sound engineers.
That was just the picture when the truck comes, they're delivering all the equipment.
Right. Yes.
They're so good, those photographs. Yeah, absolutely beautiful.
Yes,
and then you get the Our Gang kids with all these cables lying around everywhere.
Yes, yes.
And then one with Bob McGowan coming in, scratching his head, looking at the mess. It was just wonderful.
That's hilarious.
Loved it, absolutely love it. In fact, there was a letter that was on your Facebook page as well from the Victor Talking Machine division to Elmer, dated May 27th, 1929. So this is dated just after. I think Unaccustomed As We Are, it was released. It was released on May 4th, and it was Charley Chase's The Big Squawk, which was the last of the talking pictures, the last of the first talking pictures, if that makes sense, from all 4 series. So we got the Our Gang, Small Talk, the All Stars, Hurdy Gurdy, and Charley Chase's The Big Squawk. That was released on the 25th of May, 29. So this letter was dated the 27th of May. From Harry L. Sommerer, who was the head of purchasing, I believe, at Victor. And it was I'm just going to read this because it's a great little bit. Dear Mr. Raguse, it has been gratifying to see the work provided for by this agreement getting underway so quickly and so satisfactorily. And the only complaint that we of the commercial organisation can make is that the release dates are so close to the production and to each other that it keeps us hopping to see that records are available for distribution on time. Mr. Clark has spoken very encouragingly of the setup in the Roach studio, and we are proceeding to provide for an additional sound truck which we have recommended. While there are always some wrinkles that have to be ironed out connected with any new venture, it is pleasing to note how freely and smoothly the operation under this agreement is moving forward, and we are looking forward to considerable possibilities in our participation in the development of the future Roach productions. Very truly yours. Victor, very pleased with Elmer's work and how well it's going, but just a bit concerned about how many films they're tuning out.
Yeah. Yeah, which I think I'm surprised that they did churn him out rather quickly, and but he did have the personnel. Fortunately, they sent enough people there to have the personnel to get that done.
Yeah, I wondered that because they were working double shifts. Of course, they got the Our Gang kids filming during the daytime until 5 o'clock, which was kind of their curfew, and then Laurel and Hardy would come in after to shoot Unaccustomed As We Are. So I was thinking, are these guys were just working flat out all through? But I guess they must break it up into different teams. Yeah.
Well, if you notice that the sound engineer for most of the early Our Gangs was James Green.
Right.
I believe. And then my grandfather, even though he's not really credited on the first 2 or 3, they didn't put up credits for the sound. They weren't used to it, I guess. And then he pretty much took that over. But You can see later on that he assigned other people to do stuff, Harry Baker, that type of thing, William Randall, to do some of the others. And even though my grandfather was involved, he didn't mind other people taking the credit because it wasn't really his thing to go out and get, he was running his division and that was it.
That's really nice, though, isn't it? As you say, it just goes back to he's not after it for the adoration. He just wants to get the job done. I think that speaks really well of him, doesn't it? Fantastic. So we talked about the compressor, the volume limiter that he invented. There was also something else that he apparently invented that I want to just ask you about. It was the Lavalier microphone for Thelma Todd. What is
that? Was okay. So he didn't get credit for inventing that. The lavalier microphone is something that came along later, but he made something similar. Right. It was just a smaller microphone. And I've been looking at some of the early stuff with Thelma in it to see if I could spot the wire coming out of her dress. I didn't see it on Unaccustomed as We Are, but that might have been more of a close miking situation.
Yeah.
They were probably using one mic for that production, where later on they would get into more using multiple mics to a mixing board. But it was just a small one that they put in her clothing. Because she just, again, here goes back to the sound man trying to help the actors along to make the transition into sound. I do have where is it somewhere? A photograph autographed to him to Elmer Raguse, the big squawk from the little squeak.
I think I've seen that picture on your Facebook. I think you posted that. It's lovely. Yeah, it really is lovely.
And so I think the sound engineers really saved a lot of actors' careers by doing that. Stan Laurel wouldn't have had much of a problem because he used to be a stage actor.
Yeah, but although he was quite, as I understand it, he was very nervous about his voice because I don't know, it was because he had a slight lisp. And I remember reading somewhere that in fact, no, I think he on a 1957 interview, he talks about every time he recorded a scene, he wanted to hear it back straight away because he was so nervous about that in the early days. But even though he'd had that training, I think because it was getting recorded, this was something very, very different. Yeah.
And if anything, it added more to his personality, I think.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I think Oliver Hardy may have been, because I don't think he really did much stage beforehand.
I think mostly singing, I think he was mostly singing on stage. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then he was probably fairly comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of other people that weren't, and a lot of actors lost their careers because of it.
That's right.
So, I don't know a whole lot more about that. I just remember him talking about that. And actually, he didn't actually talk about that. The book that he annotated for my parents' neighbor, I read it before it was given back to the neighbor. I remember seeing that in there.
Right.
That's basically there. He also, one of the other things he did was he actually eliminated the batteries.
Oh yes, yeah. Tell me about that.
He replaced them with gas generators.
Yeah.
For basically the location scenes.
So this is batteries that would sit in the microphone. He replaced...
a big truck full of batteries. Right. I mean, it's like I was telling you about with the American Epic with the Victor system. They'd have to take a truck full of batteries, basically because they were going into rural situations where electricity wasn't very stable.
Of course, yes.
So, and I think there's a picture of him with my grandfather with Hal Roach in the battery room at the studio.
Right.
It was also used in the American Epic documentary. But so he eliminated that for location shooting by using gas generators. And there's an article about that I think I posted that shows the truck and about 3 people standing out front. And they're noted, but I looked closer and I saw my grandfather standing in the truck. So
that's what I've got it here. I've got it in front of me. Yeah, the Hal Roach Studio has just received the first portable sound truck featuring a gasoline-driven generator instead of the storage batteries formerly used to supply power for sound recording equipment. The elimination of batteries was the result of a suggestion made to ERPI by Elmer Raguse, chief recording engineer in the West for the Victor Company. Inspecting the truck are Hal Roach, H.M. Walker, vice president, and Warren Doan, general manager of the Hal Roach Studios. Yeah. I'm reading it funny because it's so small and the printout is so faint.
Yeah.
But no, that's just such it's a great photograph as well of the Hal Roach Studios truck with Victor all on the side. And yeah, you can just see Elmer inside there. Just fantastic photographs. So we were talking about Henry Ginsberg giving Elmer the sack. I think it was 1931 or 2, but he certainly comes back in 34. And interestingly, there's another article. Elmer was given the role of overseeing the cutting department as well after William Terhune leaves the department to become a director. And I think he's awarded that by Ginsberg. Henry Ginsberg has appointed Elmer Raguse head of cutting department at Hal Roach Studios. Raguse will function as chief editor in addition to his duties as head of the studio's sound department. The post of chief film editor was recently vacated when William Terhune, who was the guy that owned the big business house, he was promoted to a director on the lot. And that was from the 13th of November 1929. Yeah. So yeah, did you know that he was the head of the cutting department as well?
Yeah, I think that at some point he was the head of the camera department too for a brief period of time. I think possibly because Elmer being Elmer, when he dove into cameras and everything else about what he was going to be dealing with, and he always had the latest camera, still cameras, movie cameras that he could get as he wanted to know the entire business so he could operate his department in the context of everybody else's job. So, I have tons of stereo slides, and most of the movies have gone the way of I actually was looking for the movies to get a clip for the American Epic documentary, and I kept looking for them and looking at them. And one day I was in my garage and I started smelling the vinegar smell. I went, there are the movies. And I actually smelled them before I found them.
Oh, good grief. So these are the Laurel and Hardy movies, were they, or?
No, these are just home movies.
Oh, it's home movies. Okay.
Hi, everybody. We've been sitting here playing your message for the upteenth time. This is the day after Christmas. Mother just made a wonderful dinner, and we're sitting down here relaxing and trying to digest it. But this cassette tape recorder is a wonderful thing, and we're certainly enjoying it, and we're going to enjoy it for a long time.
Did you manage to get them transferred before they went to Bricks?
Some of it, yes. I have some of it transferred.
Yeah.
And it did help me transfer some of of my grandfather's voice. There's a lot of pointing. You know how Stan and Ollie used to point at each other or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pointing in my grandfather's home movies.
Is it really? That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And pointing at what, I have no idea. I mean, I see my father and he's pointing at somewhere off in the distance. I have no idea what.
Oh, that's great. Did he ever speak about, or your father speak about when they used their house for the filming of Bacon Grabbers?
Actually, I think they did that before my family moved in.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think Elmer was down there, but his family hadn't joined him yet. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, the sound engineers all went to, I don't remember what it was, a Hollywood hotel or something like that. I have some pictures taken from the balcony of the hotel of the Chinese theater showing Noah's Ark, a silent Noah's Ark. And off in the hills, you can see the Hollywood land sign. The land hadn't fallen down yet, so this was a Hollywood land sign. And you can see that off in the distance, which was the housing edition, basically, is what it was. And then I think then he found out, my grandfather found out he was going to be staying. They asked him if he wanted to stay. He found out he could play golf all year long out in California. Sent a telegram to my grandmother saying, "We're moving, bring Junior."
Oh, that's great. That's good. It suited him.
And I don't know if he ever went back to collect them. I've got pictures of my grandmother and my father standing next to the train that they took out to the west.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Oh, lovely. It must be so nice to have all those kind of poignant memories, those points which are so so important in your family's lives. Wonderful,
Well,
wonderful.
fortunately, like I said, he was into cameras and taking pictures and all that, so
Yeah.
It's fairly well documented.
That's great. That's really great. So Elmer left the Roach Studios 1932 to 33. I've written it down here, actually, stupid boy. And he went to work for Fox. So you don't really know anything surrounding that move then. So we're guessing that it's just because of cost cutting from Henry Ginsberg. There was no real animosity or anything.
Well, no, I don't think there was. And I'm blanking out on the guy's name that he went out there. That the same fellow he went to Cuba with. Charles Althouse. Charles Althouse. He went to Fox, which is probably where my grandfather they hired my grandfather at Fox, probably because of Charles. Charles had two sons, Charles Jr. and Clinton. Clinton and my father were very good friends. I have a number of pictures throughout the years with the Althouses and the Raguses together. And Althouse actually ended up working at Fox in the TV era. I've got a couple of pictures of my grandfather and Charles Althouse with Gale Storm and Zazu Pitts.
I think I've seen.
Who actually babysat me once.
Really?
Yeah, it was on. This was after my great grandmother passed away, and my parents were on their way back to Chicago and taking me with them. And Zazu Pitts happened to be on the same plane, so my grandfather took them to the airport, saw Zazu, and I guess she took an instant like to me, and saw that my parents were rather exhausted, and offered to babysit me for the trip back to Chicago. Now this was on a prop plane, so I don't know how long it took from Los Angeles to Chicago. She was actually an excellent judge of character. But yeah, she took care of me on the way back. So
great. That's lovely. Have you got memories of that then?
Yeah, I don't have any memory of that at all.
That's a shame.
No.
It's a good story, though. It's a very good story.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I mean, we've covered so much, some of the things that Elmer did. I mean, are there any kind of other standout achievements from Elmer's career that you want to sort of flag up, and the impact that he had on the industry as a whole?
He probably subtly had a lot of impact, behind the scenes. I don't know how much credit he ever got for that. It's interesting that during World War II, when the Hal Roach Studios were basically handed over to the United States Army to make training films, my grandfather went off to things. Although one of the things he did was train Army Air Corps photographers. The Air Force was part of the Army at that time, and which was based out of Hal Roach Studios. So he must have stayed around there for a little bit to help train those. I've got plane pictures in my memorabilia here that he took during that time. Then I know he went off to Alltech Lansing to work on mine detection equipment. I've got one picture that's in the Alltech Lansing meeting room, and it may have even been part of the Manhattan Project. I'm not sure, because it depends on what the rest of the equation behind the guy with the overcoat is standing in front of the chalkboard in the back of the room,
Right.
behind a couple of military guys. So. Because what you see is MC squared.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I think I know that.
I mean, you don't see what's behind the coat. So it's he did that. He was also an air raid warden.
Oh, was he really? Okay.
Yes, he was.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a picture of him with his little helmet on.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Yep.
Brilliant.
So and I imagine he did some other things too during that time. I have a lot of correspondence from the War Department about different workings and all that. I even have the letter of recommendation signed by Hal Roach for him to find another job during that time.
Ah, yes, I've seen that on your page. Yeah, that's really nice as well, isn't it? I mean, Roach obviously thought a hell of a lot of him, which you can quite understand.
Yeah.
So because he stayed with the Roach Studios till, was he 57? I think.
Basically till the end.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and where did he go after that? When he left Roach?
He did a couple of things at Paramount, and then ended up back at Fox again. Worked on things like Von Ryan's Express, Goodbye Charlie, Our Man Flint, Dear Bridget, which was with Bridget Bardot. Kind of in the end, it was more of a James Stewart film, but I think he did a couple television things. He did some television at the end of the Roach era. He was actually offered the job of the head of the sound department at Fox at that time. But to take that job meant that he would have had to displace the person that hired him, which was a friend, and he turned it down.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant.
So, well, again, this is near the end of his career, and he knew it. He wanted to sit back and he wanted to get back into what he was doing in the first place rather than being management.
Yes.
Because he went through periods of being management, then being, an employee and back and forth.
Yeah.
And or being in the union. He said he always kept his union card in his pocket, whether it was management or union at the whatever time, just to remind himself about what a bunch of assholes both sides were.
Yeah, that's it. That's great. Love that.
So at that point, he just, ended his career at Fox. I have a picture from his retirement party with a big cake and that thing, so that's kind of where he ended up.
Great. And did he get? I'm just looking at those certificates behind you, on the wall, Craig. Were those Academy Award nominations?
Yes.
Or would he actually?
Yes, he received 8 of them.
8 nominations.
Yes.
Wow.
Captain Caution. Hang on, let's see what we have here. Of Mice and Men was probably the best one.
Yeah.
But the year that was, I think, it was also the same year as Wizard of Oz and a lot of other really big movies.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
There's one here, same year, special sound and effects for 1 million BC, sound recording for Captain Caution, special effects and sound recording for Topper Returns, and then sound recording for Of Mice and Men. There are a couple other movies in there which I don't have the certificates for. So, yeah, he never won.
Yeah, well, a nomination is winning in itself, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah,
that is something.
Yes,
that is something. And yeah, I mean,
I know my cousin Richard was actually nominated a couple of times for Academy Awards, and he did win the BAFTA.
Wow.
So,
oh wow.
One other thing at Roach that I'd like to mention, though, is that his friendship with the cartoonist George Harriman.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you know who George Harriman was.
Crazy Cat, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Harriman officed with Beanie Walker.
Yeah. Yes.
Beanie Walker. When Beanie Walker retired, Hal Roach asked if there's anybody that would take him in, and my grandfather said, "I have a huge office. I sit at my desk. I have a drafting table in there. Come on over."
Ah, great.
So, and I don't know if you know much about Harriman at all.
Not really. Only that he drew Crazy Cat.
Well, Crazy Cat was done for the Hearst newspapers here.
Right.
If you're familiar with William Randolph Hearst, he was basically who the character was that Orson Welles did in Citizen Kane.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Harriman was Creole from New Orleans.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so he had a lot of black heritage and all that, and the reason he always wore the hat was to hide his hair.
Oh, okay.
If it had become common knowledge among the Hearst newspapers that he was not white, he would have been fired.
Oh, good grief.
So he basically hid out at Hal Roach Studios.
Right.
And Hal Roach basically being a colorblind studio, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So that's where he formed the friendship with Walker and later on with my grandfather.
Wow.
And there was a Sunday comic dedicated to my grandfather, plus I have, and you've probably seen it, is the picture that the watercolor that he drew of Crazy Cat.
Yes.
Dedicated to my grandfather.
I did see that. Yeah, that was lovely. Oh,
yeah. So that was basically that was just kind of another side for the Hal Roach Studios, my grandfather, and Beanie Walker for that matter.
Yeah, wonderful.
The other person that actually ended up working at Hal Roach was Fred Carno.
Oh yes, of course you did. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of pictures of Fred Carno in it.
You have. I hadn't seen those before.
And
They were fantastic.
yeah, I don't think he lasted very long because I don't think it was a very good relationship. What's interesting to me, being a musician, about Fred Carno is that the houseboat that he lived on the Thames River is actually now the recording studio for David Gilmour of Pink Floyd.
That's right. Yeah, it's still in good nick, isn't it? As well, that houseboat.
Yeah. So it's and Gilmour's very well aware of the history of that houseboat. So
yeah, so I believe. Yeah, that's fantastic,
Yeah.
isn't it? I love that. No, I think Carno was recruited in 1930, around the time of Night Owls, on a 5-year contract, I think it was, and he lasted about 4 months. I think Hal Roach quite quickly realised he was just a businessman. He wasn't the creator of gags and comedy that he thought he was going to be. So, yeah, he didn't last very long at all. Yeah, I had Carno's biographer David Crump on a podcast a little while ago, talking all about Carno. That he's a fascinating character as well. If you're interested in Carno, that's a really good episode to listen to. Wonderful. Have you got anything else you wanted to impart before I ask you the atoll question, Craig?
No, just a few things. Like my grandfather was a very good golfer.
Oh, okay.
Shot in the 70s quite a bit.
Right.
Played quite a few rounds with Oliver Hardy.
Oh, that's it.
Was also
a lovely photograph of those together on the golf course. That's a great photograph. Yeah.
And then basically that's about it. I mean, there's a lot of other things I could get into, like the relationships. Oh, he was very good friends with Shirley Temple's parents.
Oh, see, right, okay.
Yeah, he and my grandmother would play bridge with them.
Right. Okay.
While my dad went off and played with Shirley.
Right.
And so they must have trusted, because they were very, very, very scared about her being kidnapped. So they must have trusted my grandparents very much.
Yeah.
As far as that goes.
That's interesting.
And so it's I guess that's about it.
Oh, that's great. It's been wonderful to learn more about Elmer, because he, as I say, I have more and more respect for him every time I read a little bit more or find something in the trade papers. You know, his name keeps popping up. And I just felt it's so important to give as much recognition, to these guys as possible. So, and to have a blood relative on Craig has just been great. So thank you so much. But I am not going to let you go before I ask you the atoll question. I have to do this.
Okay.
I ask every guest. I'm not singling you out.
That's fine.
You were about to be stranded on a deserted atoll, but you are being allowed to take with you 4 Laurel and Hardy related items with you. A silent short, a talkie short, a feature film, and a Laurel and Hardy related book. What are your choices, and can you explain what you like about them? So we'll start with you. We'll start with the silent picture first.
Silent would be Putting Pants on Philip.
Oh, okay, good choice. What is it?
It cracks me up every time. In fact, I watched a little bit of it this morning.
Did you?
Just to make sure I still laughed at it, and I do. It is hilarious.
It is. It is.
This sound, even though my grandfather was not at the studio at the time, would be the music box.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. The 32. Of course he wouldn't be there.
And not only that, he kicked me.
He kicked you?
Yes, officer, right in the middle of my daily duties.
Oh, he kicked you, did he? Oh. Hey, you! What? Come here! Go down and see what he wants.
You go down and see what he wants.
Don't argue with me. Go see what the man wants.
I'm not arguing.
Go ahead.
What do you want?
Go down and see what he wants.
What?
I don't want you. How about that other monkey? What?
He don't want me. He wants the other monkey. You!
Oh!
By the way, as a side, the director, Bernard McMahon of the American Epics, told me that was the first film he ever saw, and that's what got him hooked on film.
Is that really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a brilliant
The
short.
feature film was then purely for sentimental reasons would be Babes in Toyland.
Oh, because that's the first one you saw. Yes, of course.
Yeah, and with my dad, we always watched it together.
Isn't it wonderful? It does everything but talk.
Wonderful, yes, but not what I ordered.
What do you mean?
I ordered 600 soldiers at 1 foot high.
What? You took that order. What was it?
I thought you said 100 soldiers at 6 foot high.
You got the order all wrong. I couldn't give those things to my children to play with.
Put it back in the box and get out of here. You're through.
Here's another mess your partner sent you. Why didn't you attend to the thing in the right way in the first place?
Well, I couldn't
Well,
help
if you'd
it.
have been watching what you were doing, you wouldn't have done this into it. Come out of there, not you. It's for him.
Do you still watch that every year, on TV?
I have not watched that for a while.
Yeah.
I need to. I keep looking at it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
have you seen Randy's new book about it?
no, I have not seen it. I'd like to get it once I can afford it. So,
Highly recommended, as you would expect
Yeah.
from Randy. Yeah, highly recommended.
but Randy's book, as far as would be the book.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. A wonderful
I
book.
mean, that's it's sitting right in front of me here. So
Always close at hand. You always have to have that close at hand.
yes. Yeah, I've been going through it quite a bit here the last couple of weeks.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
No, it's
And
fantastic.
and it's also because I was happy because I could contribute to that edition.
Great.
And he basically took some things I wrote verbatim and put them in the book. So
Brilliant.
and there's a lot of pictures in there that I supplied to him also.
Oh, I bet. Yes, I can imagine. Yeah, that's no, it is a fabulous book. Highly recommended, and it will keep you occupied for a good while on your deserted atoll as well. So that's great. Is there anything that you wanted to sort of promote, Craig, while you've got our listeners' ears? Is there anything that you're working on that you want to just mention?
Well, I am trying to write a book about my grandfather and put some of the stories and some of the technical stuff in there. Unfortunately, I'm not as up on the technical stuff as I should be. Obviously, because when I got into it, basically, well, after World War II, when the Army handed the studio back to Hal Roach, and they put in the new equipment and all that, my grandfather said the Army pretty well trashed the place. Mr. Roach pretty well confirmed that when I talked to him also. But they put together there's like eight reel of or mag tape or mag film with the sprockets and all that to run in the synchronous motors, and I've got pictures of a lot of that installment. And what's interesting to me is that would have been in 45 or something like that, is that when I got into college in 1976, still working basically on the same equipment.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
and which stayed the same. And then I graduated in 1980, had my studio. About 10 years later, digital cam was in, and I'm obsolete. and from then on, it's just ballooned.
Yeah.
But I think that just shows how far audio has come in that period of time.
Yeah.
My grandfather once told me that audio is going to be reduced to zeros and ones.
Right.
On computer, and he had the foresight to tell me that, and he died in 71 or something like that. So
he knew.
But he already knew where it was going.
Wow.
And so it's just as quickly. It's amazing how much quickly the technology has become now. I mean, I have a box about a foot wide, about 8 inches deep, that basically does everything, more than anything he ever did, and basically everything my recording studio did in a room full of equipment.
Yeah, it's frightening, isn't it? Yeah, frightening.
So,
Yeah.
and frankly, I don't really know how to use it very well.
Well, we won't go into that. Craig, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been beyond wonderful to chat to you about your grandfather, and he really is a hero of the Hal Roach Studios and certainly of Laurel and Hardy, and a huge part of why they were so successful and made that successful transition from silence to sound. So thank you for what you do in keeping your grandfather's legacy alive. You know, your social media posts are just lovely to flick back on. I was just looking at sort of 10 years worth of posts, looking at all these images that come through and seeing people's reactions to them. People like Randy and Richard Ban, you know, who haven't seen these images before, and it's just great that you know, even today we can come across images that just make us want to zoom in and look closer and look at all the little details of the equipment that he's using, and just fabulous. So thank you so much for what you do, Craig, and yeah, for joining us today. It's been really great.
I've enjoyed myself. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. It's always an honour to have a blood relative of one of Stan and Babe's friends and colleagues on the show, and it's great to see Craig keeping his grandfather's story alive. His knowledge and willingness to share Elmer's archive of photos and documents is brilliant, and I'm sure Elmer would be very happy and very proud. And I really hope that this bonus episode has served as a suitable tribute to a man that didn't want praise or recognition, but deserved so much for the positive impact that he had on the wonderful films and people at the Hal Roach Studios. So that's all for today's show. Coming up in the next episode, we get the Talkies properly underway with episode 35, Unaccustomed as We Are, and joining me will be our good friends Randy Scripvet and Richard W. Ban. I'm really excited to enter this new phase of the podcast, as I know the sound shorts are so adored by all of us. Also, just to whet your appetite, and some of you will have read about this in my newsletter already, I had the wonderful opportunity last week of sitting down and interviewing the legendary film critic and author Leonard Maltin. We had a super chat all about his love for the boys, his earliest memories of Laurel and Hardy, and lots more besides, including, of course, the atoll question. So do look out for that episode, you won't want to miss it. It's scheduled to go live sometime in March, but if you can't wait that long, patrons of the podcast will be getting early access to the video episode of that interview very, very soon. If you haven't signed up to us on Patreon yet and you'd like the chance to access the library of exclusive episodes already and waiting for you to explore, just click the Patreon link in the podcast show notes on our website or visit patreon.com, that's patreon.com, and for the cost of a cup of coffee per month, you can get stuck straight in. So thank you once again to today's guest, Craig Raguse. Thank you to the Bohunks Orchestra and Basta Music. And most importantly, thanks to you for choosing to spend this time with me again. And until next time, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And a very goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Thank you.